Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. On this episode, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by my very good friend, Yoni Benheim. He is the guitarist, vocalist, as well as a founding member of the UK Occult Death Metal band, Grave Miasma. Now, I know that those of you who've been following this podcast for a while know that this platform is officially the home to quite a few artists speaking publicly for the first time, or at least within an intricate format of audio and video, and speaking as openly as we would do on this podcast. And of course, as much of a privilege as it has been to have quite a few of those, this is not something that ever becomes less humbling whenever it happens, okay? So today's episode is no different to that list, and of course I'm sure those of you who are big Grave Miasma fans and have been following the band for a long time know that there's probably not many other interviews like this one out there where you get to hear them speak as directly and as unfiltered. So again, it's really a pleasure, and I say so with pride, that I was able to conduct this interview with Yoni. So yeah, we got to talk a lot about various different things, just from the history of Grave Miasma, how the band came to be, and how they ended up with their signature sound, and the more occult, esoteric aspects of death metal, which they're so good at executing. And we also got to talk about just various different things in life. And of course, Yoni lives in Hong Kong, so we got to talk a little bit about that. We got to talk about art in today's world and how it is affected by minimalism, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And we also got to talk about their recent music video for Rogyapa, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. And yeah, we got to talk about what was the concept behind that, and the open air burials and things, and we got to sort of dig a little bit beneath the surface of the lyrical concepts of that song. And at the very end of it all, we also got to talk about their recent string of shows that they played in China. Now, of course, that was a very interesting part of the conversation, because the more we got to talk about that, we also drifted off into the subjects of social credit score systems and whatnot, which I'm sure many of you who've been following this podcast for a while will probably appreciate that side of the conversation. So shortly, we'll be coming that. If you are new to the Iblis Manifestations Podcast, first of all, welcome. We're absolutely stoked to have you here, and this is what we do. We have long-format conversations with a lot of prominent artists and personalities, especially from within the underground, and we get to dig deep, and we get to go beneath the layers, and we do so with long, extended conversations that are absolutely unfiltered. Okay, so if that's something that you enjoy and you wish to support the channel, then you can do so by subscribing and sharing our content. I know this is cliche, and you probably hear every other channel on YouTube say it, or Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this from, but it really makes a difference. It genuinely helps the channel. Okay, so any support would be much appreciated. In addition to that, my band Trivax recently released an album titled Illawa Burns Out. This came out at the end of September last year via the UK publishing house Cult Never Dies. And this album has been making the rounds. And of course, I do have to mention that I was really honored to see that as a part of so many top albums of the year. It's not why we make our music, but it is certainly validating when you see that kind of a feedback at the end of the year. So for any of you who've never listened to Trivax before, then of course I would very much appreciate it if you had a spare moment to go and check out our newest album, Illawa Burns Out, and see what you think of it, see if it's your cup of tea. In addition to that, one more thing before we go into the episode. To those of you who've been thinking of making positive personal shifts in your physical well-being, I am now currently taking on new clients for my fitness program titled Trial by Fire. And I am, of course, someone who has experience of being obese. I have experience of being extremely unhealthy, and I had no choice but to change things around for myself. And during that process, I was able to educate myself on nutrition, on workouts, and now, of course, with the official education behind my belt, I am now in the position of helping other people reach the same transformation as I did. I lost over 40 kilos, and in exchange for that, I also gained quite a lot of muscle. And whatever your goals are, whether it's to lose fat or gain muscle or just have a general better lifestyle, then I am your man. So there's a link in the description where it says Trial by Fire. And if you go on there, you get to fill in the contact form and get in touch with myself directly. And we can start a conversation and see how I can help you. So, ladies and gentlemen, with all of that out of the way, I'm truly thrilled to have you all on board with me for this very special episode featuring Grave Miasma. So, let's jump straight to the chase. Without further ado, please welcome Yoni Benheim to Iblis Manifestations. Yoni, welcome to Iblis Manifestations, man. What an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you doing on the other side of the world?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. Well, more or less. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a privilege. I've listened to a lot of episodes and really enjoy the content. So, yeah.
That's awesome to hear. Yes. Yeah. That really glad to hear that, man. I guess I've had Roland on here before, I guess. So we've had traces of Grave Miasma on Iblis Manifestations previously, but I'm really looking forward to speaking to yourself here. I mean, first of all, just out of curiosity, I mean, how's life in Hong Kong? How long have you been there now?
18 months, more or less.
Okay.
It's a fascinating place to live. It's very easy to live here in many respects. I don't know, you can ask me specific things, whether whether it will be disseminated to everyone who listens or not. But I'm pretty open about most things here, so you can ask away.
Sure. That sounds good. Well, when you say it's easier, in what way are you comparing that? I mean, I guess if London is your other reference, then London's a pretty tough place to live in, as I'm sure most people would know. So I don't know, what's the details of, like, let's say work life, or just even, or how are you even managing the band at the moment? Because you guys are still fairly active.
I guess not as much as we would be. We have a few shows coming up in the US in May. And then I'll be back in the summer for a few shows in Europe. To be announced, confirmed, but to be announced.
Cool.
And then aside from that, I'm doing what I guess how a lot of other bands these days operate, just writing remotely, sending it to the other guys. And yeah, there'll be another record, of course, but the delay compared to the last break might be a bit longer, but that's just how it is. Some bands operate that way even when they're living in the same city. So yeah, it
For sure.
doesn't change the amount of time I spend working on stuff, but it just slows things down.
I mean, already, I mean, I guess, what was it, like 5 years in between Endless Pilgrimage and Abyss of Wrathful Deities?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So are we expecting it to be that long then? Is that basically what you're saying?
Who knows, longer? Maybe
Sure.
longer, who knows, man? But
Uh-huh.
it doesn't, we're not one of these bands that has to focus on the time frame of output. We're not on a kind of a contract arrangement where we have to release something every X amount of years. We take our time, depending on all the circumstances. Band members playing in other bands, regular life shit that goes on. Yeah, everything is a factor. So yeah, here it's just going to take a bit longer, but it will happen.
Absolutely. Well, that's exciting to hear, man. I mean, yes, like you said, with other bands, I know Danny's in like a million of them at the moment, all great bands, by the way, such as
Hmm.
Adorier, probably most notably at the moment. But yeah, that's cool to hear, man. And I can appreciate that as well, because with Grave Miasma's music, it's very. There's always a lot of thought that's gone into the music. It's never felt like a forced or like a plastic kind of an output. It's quite the opposite,
Mm.
with all of the little details. I mean, one of my favorite songs of yours that I was listening to not long before this podcast is Eschaton.
Okay.
And I was listening to that, and it's just like all of like the little breaks and things that come into that song, all the like the pauses that only happen once, and the
Mm.
way that first riff kind of like drags out, but then there's still vocals on top of it. It's very clever compositions and songwriting, but also it really feeds into that, I suppose, occult aspect of it. Because I suppose you could say Grave Miasma is kind of like occult death metal band. I don't know how true that rings to your ears.
Yeah, I mean, however people want to describe it as, it's makes no difference for us. We actually started using that label because I had a flyer from the Necromantia Verathron split LP, and that's how it was described on the flyer. So it's like, oh, I'm going to
Mm.
steal that. That's pretty cool. And I think it became like a label that other bands or labels were using to promote other bands, and then it got a bit of how can I say? For me, when I hear a band that plays occult death metal, I think like, okay, lots of reverb, maybe focus on the overall vibe compared to the songwriting. I'm not
Mm.
even thinking specific bands here. It's more of a caricature. So we kind of moved away from that tagline a little bit. We don't announce ourselves that way. Others
Sure, I
might, but
understand. Yeah, but it's an observation that you accept if it's
yeah, sure,
external.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it makes
Whatever
sense.
it
Yeah,
is.
I think that's part of the reason, probably, why with you guys, even though I guess technically you're a death metal band, I think it's probably part of the reason why you've had such an appeal to the black metal audience,
Hmm.
because it goes deeper. It's not just about blood and gore or whatever. There's a real sense of not just occulticism, but also there's just a sense of poetry to it, which I especially felt like you delivered on the last record, and it's I think that's what makes it interesting. That's what make people who really want to find a little bit more, because it's kind of like one of them things, death metal or even black metal is something that over time becomes very easily saturated,
Hmm.
and that's okay. It's cool. Like, okay, yeah, you guys got cool riffs, that's fine, but then what else? And I feel like Grave
Hmm.
Miasma has always been a band that probably from its inception has always kind of given you that extra layer of depth that you can kind of get into and get lost in, and it probably explains the passionate provocation that it has created in its following as well.
Yeah, well, that's your observation. That's cool. Thank you. I think for us, we do focus on small details, like you said earlier with that particular track, and that really comes out in the rehearsal room. So when we go through structures of tracks, some songs that we've done maybe we have 10 or 15 versions of those songs with different structures recorded somewhere, probably discarded by now. But we really listen to stuff and we think, maybe this can change, and maybe this can change. And that's another reason why things take a long time for us to complete. So we have to be really, really 100% satisfied with the arrangement of something. Okay, when you record something, maybe a year later you listen to it again and think, should have changed this thing to this thing, etc., etc.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
at the time, we really set ourselves to a point where any other changes would be flogging a dead horse. So that's, like I said, one of the reasons why it takes us a bit longer to record albums than maybe other bands.
That's interesting because John from Incantation told me exactly the same thing. He said that if it's not for the rest of his bandmates kind of sometimes stepping in, he could just keep changing a song over and over until, it's like it just turns into something different, So I guess it's good to be able to actually focus on just encapsulating it rather than, I guess, constantly trying to strive for perfection without execution. So I think, so actually on that note as well, and this is something that I've actually been really looking forward to talking to you about, I would imagine that one thing that will have been quite brave for you guys to partake in as far as a project is concerned is the music video that you did. And that's a very, very cool video, by the way. Obviously we had a mutual director and producer, Alex DeMoller. Morbid Angle, yes, that's right. So for Rogyapa, I believe. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Very fascinated with the concept of that video. I mean, what can you tell us about that one? Because I know lots of people have seen this, and it's thought-provoking, and obviously it's showing this old tradition of a method of burial that belongs to the older Eastern traditions. But just take us through that. I mean, how did the idea come up? How did you come up with the concept for it? Just take us through all the different layers of that project.
Okay, so a lot of lyrics that I not come up with necessarily, but a lot of the work we do lyrically is very influenced by stuff I read at the time. And I was reading, now I can't even recall the name of the book. I have to kind of look in my Kindle for that, but it's a book written by a British traveler in Tibet this is prior to the Chinese coming and assuming control of it. So it was prior to that. So I guess before the 40s and 50s. So I guess he was a half travel writer, half anthropologist, was just detailing his encounters with Tibetan culture. And he wrote about the ceremony, the sky burial ceremony at Byagator, I think it's called. And Rogyapa is the practitioner who does this ceremony. And he writes about how this person is, even though this is something that happens as part of, I guess, daily life in that area of the world, he himself is a marginalized person of the community, kind of mysterious person, lives on his own in a shack in the wilderness. So I tried to put myself in that, through the eyes of the practitioner doing the ceremony, what it would be like, or at least observing what it would be like for him to do that. And with regards to the process of the video, now I think Alex and another friend who worked in the video, Jack, they're very good friends of ours, been friends for many years, and they wanted to do a video. They asked us, and I was very reluctant to do it because how I recall metal video, at least extreme metal videos on maybe a low budget, as being that I can reference them here, but I probably don't need to, because anyone will know which ones I'm talking about, especially from the sort of early to mid 90s. They are very cringeworthy, laughable, and notorious for that. So my immediate reaction to this idea was...
So you're talking about Hecate Enthroned, right?
One of them, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're excellent guys, but they had very, very good guys. I love them, but they had one of the most notorious, I think. If you want to call it cringe videos of the 90s, probably.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate it. That was how things were. That was the spirit of the time. And
Yeah, sure.
however, when we kind of thought about it, it made me go back to videos I like. And I actually really got into music largely through videos, uh, being 5, 6, 7 years old. And a lot of the videos
Hmm.
that I first encountered were from like Queen videos, for example. I used to have a
Okay.
VHS of Queen videos. That was the first band I really got into as a
Hmm.
5 or 6 year old. And it made me think that actually they have a lot of elements that you don't need a big budget to recreate. You can do that, the kind of things I had in mind, just in the room. So we hired a venue to do the kind of live um, recital of the track. And
And you did this at Electroworks, right?
exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was during, yeah, just an empty venue. We didn't play on the stage; it was just on the floor. So
Sure.
they got the lighting guys in, and it was really well done. It was done just in maybe 5 or 6 hours after we set everything up. Not even that, perhaps. And it was great to see people working on the video that knew what they were doing, as opposed to what I thought would occur. You know, it's a very kind of awkward, non, very a style that wouldn't necessarily be conducive to the kind of music we played. But anyway, so we after the live footage we sourced a lot of footage about this ceremony. Some of it was actually taken from a movie, which we had to manipulate a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
other stuff we found, on various platforms online. So once
Alex
we
is
were
usually
able
very
to,
good at doing that, by the way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we were able to cut those scenes within the video and give it more of a chaotic vibe. Plus, all the graphics you see there were done by a friend as well,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that I think that gave it the extra kind of visual quality that I really wanted to have. And I just had not, I'm not a visual person. I'm not very technologically inclined when it comes to design and art, etc. So to have this included in the project was the final kind of the missing piece that really elevated it above just a band playing in a room.
Right, right. It's a very interesting video to watch. It's one of them every time you revisit it, because I must have
And
watched it.
appreciate a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because prior to Trivax working with Alex, I must have watched that video probably at least 10 times, just to kind of get a gauge of his capabilities as a director and producer. And one thing that I liked about it was the fact that every time you watch it, you do see new elements and you come across things that perhaps you didn't quite see as much the time before that. But you are also right in saying that you don't always necessarily need a big budget to make something that's good. I think that's one big problem with a lot of entertainment productions, whether it's companies, whether it's bands, or whether it's even Hollywood. You can't just throw money at something and then expect it to be good, because at the end of the day, it's about what's the core essence of that art piece that really speaks for itself and the effects that it's trying to create. And I guess as far as music videos are concerned, a good example of that would be the Danzig videos from late 80s, early 90s, because that was all homemade. I think She Rides was the first one that he ever recorded, and then that ended up becoming a hit, and that basically had a budget of zero. I think all they needed was just like maybe 2 or 3 strippers and the band playing the song, and then that's all they needed, and it suited the aesthetic of the time as well. So it's one of those things. It's about having a balance and then just actually having something to present, which in this case, obviously, conceptually speaking, especially you guys did. It's a very fascinating topic, man. It's interesting to know as well that you were actually trying to approach this from the perspective of the practitioner, as you put it.
But we did look at a lot of videos to kind of get inspiration. Like a really good video is actually God of Emptiness, Morbid Angel.
That's right.
It's probably got a much higher budget than I would fathom. But even though I actually really hate that song, but the video is awesome.
What, you don't like God
So
of
that was one thing we.
Emptiness?
No. No.
What's your beef? It's like one of the best songs ever.
It's
I'm actually
the
really surprised to hear that. I would have thought with your style, I would have thought that would be like a staple song for you guys to kind of, I don't know, I guess have as a good example of the how evil death metal could get.
yeah. I think it's just the more clean vocal parts of that track. I'm really not into. I mean, I love Covenant as an album; it's amazing. But gladly, that's the last track. So beforehand,
This is
hit the stop
so
button.
surprising to me. This is very, very surprising, and I bet to most people listening as well. But then again, it's possible that you're not the only person. It's just, to me, the way I looked at it was, wow, they left the heaviest and the most evil one till last. But you're like, okay, it's last, so I'll skip it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. And that's not a sentiment I think that's shared by the other guys.
Right. I think
There's
it's
a
interesting,
video.
Yeah. I mean, the video is amazing, because you look at the, it just has that sort of early 90s, especially when they used to have that on Headbangers Ball, and it has that sort of VHS quality to it. There's something
Yes.
timeless about that. You can't recreate that. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. So we went back to a lot of videos actually, and especially ones that I'd seen, growing up. Like that was a good example, and quite a few others that I can't really recall right now. But and it switched my mentality a little bit. I thought, actually, no, there's a lot of videos I really like. It's just there are some tropes of metal videos that I really dislike. We didn't include those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of very interesting stuff from the early 90s because for me, one of the best things that I got hold of when I was back in Iran, I think I was either 14 or 15 years old, and I got hold of this bootleg DVD that Nuclear Blast did, and this was at the time. It was like a music video compilation, basically.
Right.
And then
Right.
on this, they had Hypocrisy, they had, I think they had Leviathan, they had Amorphis, Benediction were on there, and all of these bands. And I remember watching that and being like, this is cool as hell. They even had couple of videos from Mortification. Do you know the Christian death metal band?
Yeah. I remember seeing those. I've seen those when I was younger. Yeah.
Yeah. They had like one song was like, I think, Scroll of the Megaloth, and it's actually like, I didn't know they were Christian at the time, and I actually thought, wow, this sounds and looks pretty cool. And then they had another song on the same DVD called Noah Was a Knower, and it's the most fucking horrible shit you will ever hear. It's such a bad song. And the video is pretty bad too, and but they took a very weird direction of Jesus metal. But it's cool, and there was this thing back then, I think maybe without the internet, that there was like a real buzz to these things, and I imagine, I'm sure you probably sort of fantasized about this to some extent, that if this video that you released was released in the early 90s, like what kind of impact it could have made, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Different times now, so yeah, those thoughts are very fleeting, and I know that there's no kind of mass output these days compared to, like you say, Headbangers Ball or any of its the subsequent shows that were still doing that stuff. But there's nothing that exists now, but everything is on YouTube, and the outreach is wider in terms of potential viewers, but it misses I guess that special quality being shown, because you're right. I mean, when I got into metal in the late 90s, so I watched Headbangers Ball and the other shows that came after it, and I would see Into the Pit.
Yeah.
And that's how I first heard a lot of bands for the first time. That's how I first heard Manowar, Bathory, a whole host of others, I guess. And
I forgot Bathory did a video, because they did Yeah, I forgot Bathory did a video because they did One Road to Asabe, didn't they?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, fucking great song. That's that's so you're speaking about just how you kind of grew up as a metalhead in like you said in the 90s and watching Headbangers Ball and all of that.
Mhm.
It made me think actually. So I've been curious to talk to you about this because I'm also fully aware that I know you haven't done many interviews like this, which is why I think this is cool and special that you decided
Sure.
to come on. So just to really get a coverage on that side of things as well. I mean, how did Grave Miasma even come about? And then how did you guys tap into this very, I guess, unique brand of death metal or extreme metal that you guys ended up creating?
Yeah, obviously Danny's my older brother, and we always wanted to be in a band far before we could actually play any instruments. So we always had this idea of forming a band together ever since I don't know, ever since I can remember. And really everything came together when I met Ro. I was 16, I think, just turned 16. And in London, there used to be a god awful rock club that was quite notorious for not having any age policy at the door. So you
Right.
could go in and you could buy alcohol, no questions asked, and it was just where people used to go, whether you were into rock or metal or sometimes even not. And I met Ro there. We were the only guys in this club wearing extreme metal shirts, and we struck up a conversation. And this being pretty much before mobile phones were ubiquitous, we exchanged landline numbers. And a couple of days later, he gave me a call, and I was very surprised. And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." We chatted about music for about an hour, 2 hours, and he invited me to where he lived in South London. Uh, and I'd never even willingly or knowingly gone to South London before, so very different. Just to even take the hour and a half journey. So eventually, he was playing guitar a lot. I really started playing guitar a bit more seriously. I had a few lessons when I was maybe 10, 11 years old, gave it up and resumed playing when I was 13, 14, just not nothing serious. And that's, you could probably hear that on our demo tape. It's very raw. Okay, the sound is pretty good, but in terms of playing, it's pretty raw, and the riffs are riffs that teenagers would write. They are pretty primitive, ugly, and that's the beauty of it, of course.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we actually, when we were hanging out, the three of us, by that point, I think I'd known Ro for maybe 2 years, and we would hang out a lot, almost every weekend. Sometimes, the three of us, and we had this idea to form. It was actually more, we wanted to form a black thrash band initially, kind of like a denim vest patch kind of band,
I
soaked
could
in
see
cheap
it.
beer.
Sure.
Yeah, but yeah, that didn't really, it didn't really come out that way, and um, so I can't really remember the time frame of things, but pretty quickly we had 4 tracks to record as a demo. Um, if memory serves, we didn't actually rehearse that often to get the songs nailed. We just had them written, and we recorded it mostly in a rehearsal room. Yeah, and then that was the first step, really. And we found that the demo gained a lot of traction. We the first, I think, remember the first zine interview I ever did was from Bolivia. So somehow the tape got to Bolivia, and we started getting emails and even letters from members of bands much older than us, bands that I really liked. And I thought, oh, hang on a second, we just these teenagers doing this shit, but people who are 10, 15 years older than us are into it. So we thought, hang on, might be something here that we could really work on and keep developing and keep developing. And yeah, then everything evolved from that first step.
That's absolutely fascinating. So, like you said, then I guess with yourself and Danny, then you guys will have been playing for years prior to actually, I guess, really making something of it. And it's interesting that you say that you were initially going to go towards a black thrash kind of a sound, because as much as I can understand it, knowing your taste in music, it's kind of the opposite of the direction you eventually ended up taking, right?
Yeah, I think the idea was there, but when it actually came to writing stuff, just other things came out. And yeah, we were obviously, because that was a great age for discovering bands as well. So uh, because we all missed out on the glory days of the 90s by maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, we were all playing catch up when it came to, the cult stuff, the real stuff.
Yeah.
And whilst we were discovering stuff like, I don't know, Shub from Mexico, at the same time we were getting into Omen or Sirith Ungol or Thurgathon or Mayhemic Truth, stuff like that. So everything that was killer, we were getting a hold of, and it all just contributed to what we were coming out with.
And originally you were Gold Molester. I think that was it in 2002?
So the demo and the 7-inch. Yeah.
Right. That's very cool. And then when was it that you changed to Grave Miasma? Was it like maybe 4 years later or something?
2005, I think.
2005. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, same band members, same everything. I just decided that's a shitty name, and that's really the essence of it. I think I've been asked the question maybe 100 times, but it doesn't even need to be asked. The question, it should be obvious. The answer should be obvious.
Sure. I understand. Yeah, but it's one of them things as well. It's still valid. Because you never know. Because it could be any reason why you would want to go from Goat Molester to Grave Miasma. But what I love about it is the fact that you kept the G and M part of it. You kept the initials.
Yeah. That was important. And at the time, because we really were into goat bands, I guess, arch goats, goat lords. And I always have to kind of add a bit of nuance to this, because then you couldn't even see a photo of these bands apart from maybe what was on the back of a CD or record. Archgoat hadn't reformed. They were a very mysterious act. Same with Goat Lord. Like, nobody knew anything about them at all, really. Apart from there's some strange acid freaks from the Nevada desert that created this otherworldly album. So we wanted to kind of keep things in that tradition. And what happened after, in the space of those maybe 3 or 4 years, there are other bands with similar names coming out, and they all had a very similar aesthetic. And I thought, I don't really want to be part of that kind of pigeonholed in that way. I wanted to just stand on our own. And a lot of the music we were writing didn't really fit that style anyway. So yeah, it was a very easy decision.
Absolutely. Well, it's very interesting to know the history of it all and how it sort of somehow immediately got traction just from being this underground cult thing, But then again, that's at the same time, I do understand why it was like that, because like I said to you earlier, there's that extra additional depth that's to the music of Grave Miasma that kind of gets that reaction out of people that, oh yeah, there's just a little bit more in riffs here, there's a little bit more insight that you can behold. And it's interesting to me that you said that a lot of it also just comes from what you're reading and whatnot. Have you always been into reading?
No, actually not really.
Cool.
It was really when I was younger, really I had a very, very narrow focus of interest, and that was music and football. That was it. So thereafter, when I was at university, is when I really started getting into reading a lot, and ever since, just anything and everything, really. So I take a lot of influence from a lot of things. It could be something historical, it could be something literature that has no connection to kind of darkness or morbidity or something else, but it might tap into some subconscious elements of something dark. So in some ways, I try to find the connect. Well, if it is something that I find impactful, I try to find some resonance that it could be interpreted in a musical sense.
Sure, I understand. Was there any of that darkness in particular that perhaps resonated with your own background, perhaps? Because it's one of them things, that it's like when you kind of go through the phase and then you're always looking elsewhere, and then you're always trying to search for something. It's like, oh, what's something that's in depth, and then something that's dark that really fits this music that we're trying to create. And then sometimes you kind of come back to your own roots, like ancestral roots, meaning, and then find out what the best stuff you could find is sometimes just already there within you. Did you ever, and I'm speaking this because this has been my own personal experience, right? Where I've had all these interests in occult and spirituality and things, trying to find the darker side of things, and then realizing that, oh my God, my own history as a Persian is the most fucking rich thing as far as that is concerned, at least as far as my own interests are. So did you have a similar kind of epiphany at any point?
I wouldn't say knowingly. Yeah, you say epiphany. I don't think there was ever epiphany. It was more kind of things evolved, I suppose. No, I don't think I ever had any kind of epiphany in that sense at all. Things just have their own motion or their own trajectory. And in terms of my own ancestral stuff, I mean, that's multi-layered, I suppose. Yeah, but I come from a family. My father's side, they are quite mystical people, in their own sense. So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something I can't explain that exists.
It's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but both yourself and Danny are originally, you're originally from Israel, right?
Yeah, my dad is. Yeah.
Your father is. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sure. So you're half Israeli. Interesting that Roland is also, Cohen, come on. It's interesting that you guys sort of would meet in the middle and then probably do something in this realm of work that you ended up doing, from at least coming from somewhat of a Jewish background.
Yeah, it's just one of these accidents, accidents of and coincidences. But yeah, I don't know really what to say about that. I mean, that you could probably look at your record shelves and actually realize, actually, no, there are a lot of people with that background playing in bands. Probably every other band in New York at some point or another. Or,
that is true. Yeah.
I'd rather listen to Rush or Roster Boss era Manowar than most things. So
that is very interesting, yeah. But nevertheless, the fact that you were teenagers with that background somewhere in your DNA, and then meeting in London over an extreme form of music, and then thus creating the type of death metal that you did, I think that's quite special. I think we gotta probably give that credit, or maybe perhaps I'm looking into things too much because I'm very good at doing that also. But I just think it's a cool coincidence that kind of happened.
Yeah, I think it's more coincidental than anything else. But musically, if you listen especially to Exalted Emanation and Adore Sepulchrum, there are a lot of Eastern stuff on there. My father's actually born in, like a lot of Israelis, is Moroccan. A lot of Israelis are of Moroccan origin, and
interesting.
He was born in some hilltop village in the middle of nowhere. So there's a lot of how can I say, a lot of history in that side of things. A lot of richness to that history as well. So, and also musically, a lot of richness coming from that culture.
Which is interesting because I know that you have actually performed a lot of traditional Eastern instruments as well. I know you've at least played the oud. Is that correct?
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well as some others as well, perhaps. How did that idea come about?
Um, so with the oud stuff, I always knew what it was, even when I was a kid, and yeah, I just wanted one at some stage or another, and managed to get one, and it just sounds great. It sounds very earthy. It sounds very primal,
Mm.
and really, without knowing how to play, I hadn't had any lessons or anything like that. We incorporated it on Exalted Emanation. Then I started learning properly with a teacher I found in London.
Oh,
I
cool.
was getting pretty good at it, much better than I was at guitar at the time. And then other things got in the way, and I stopped learning. But I was still playing a little bit. But now I don't have access to my one, so that's kind of put on the back burner for the time being.
It's a painful instrument to carry with you because it has an extremely fat body, and then it's like it's almost shaped like an apple, with the top part being like the neck, because the neck of the instrument is very small, right? And it's fretless too, right?
Fretless, yeah, small neck, like a pear shape kind of body, and then the head is angled. So yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
very, very cumbersome unless you have a really good hard case. But a lot of the hard cases are custom made. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't have a hard case. It's very expensive to get something built to those dimensions because it's so atypical.
Sure, yeah. It'll be cheaper to buy yourself a grave, I think.
Just bury it with me. That's the
That's
best
it.
option.
And that's without the miasma.
Mm, yeah. So
Amazing.
it's an instrument I love playing on. Um, I love hearing it, and the beauty of it is that there's no messing around with tone. There's no messing around with effects. It's already there. It already has its own tonality and own natural reverb in itself. So yeah, it's what can I say? It's a great thing to hear and play.
Yeah, it is a cool thing because I always feel like a lot of times it's not something that you hear incorporated with this style of music very often, but usually when you hear it, it always feels like it's just kind of there as a form of pretense rather than actually serve the song. Which is why I was careful. I've always been
Mhm.
careful of not overusing it, but then when using it with Trivax, actually doing it right, and then really letting it breathe the character of the instrument. But interestingly enough, I was the same as yourself. I never had any classes or anything on an instrument like that, which ideally you
Mm.
really should, because they're their own thing. A lot of times in traditional Eastern instruments, many of them, they'll have like quarter steps,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is like for your ears to even register that, it's a difficult thing, right?
Yeah, I guess but that's the main feature of the instrument, especially as a fretless instrument, and
Mm.
that knowing the quarter steps comes with just picking up the instrument. It's almost intuitive to play, and it's
Yeah.
probably the same with I guess you're playing setar, right?
Yeah, I only used a baklama. So that's actually an instrument that's
Hmm.
more popular around the Turkish side of things, but it's basically a setar that you play with picks, more or less. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I
I
have
didn't really
a
have any.
Saz.
Yeah, 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 cool. Yeah, I didn't have any training on it. I just picked it up. The first time I bought it, we were in Turkey, and then I got the pick, and then I started playing
Mhm.
Raining Blood on it, and then because that's
Right, right,
the
right.
that's the first thing I could think of. But there is a real art to it. But it just has a fascinating sound. Just the fact that these people came up with these instruments way back in the day, and all the intricacies, and how some of the
Hmm.
instruments are like, I forget which one it is, but it specifically has to be made out of goat skin. I think it might be a tar, because a tar has the goat,
Right.
like almost like a percussive thing beneath the strings, where it kind of
That's
allows it
right. Yeah,
to
yeah. The body
capture
of
the
it.
sound. Yeah, and that's like I'm pretty sure that's specifically only made out of goat skin over wood, which is like crazy. Like, how the fuck did we come up with that?
classical music is very, I guess, popular in Iran, right? So you would have had access to that when you were, I'm assuming, when you were small, hearing that stuff, whether from your family or just out and about.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, my father's he's a traditional Persian music connoisseur, and I was very lucky in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's ironic because when I was a kid, I absolutely hated hearing it. I detested the sound of the music, and part of it is very simply put because I didn't understand it. It's not really music
Mm-hmm.
that's easily understood, especially when you've already heard modern day pop. It's just like a different league of its own. But like you said, it's like any kind of classical, it takes a degree of intelligence and understanding to really get why a piece of music is good. It's interesting, actually. I'm glad this came up because I was thinking about this the other day, that it's very interesting how over time music has become simplified. You know what I mean? And just like the way architecture and buildings and cars and designs and everything has become minimized, I feel like the exact same has happened with music as well, because if you notice, like the old European way of things, where things were always very detailed, even something like a telephone booth or like a
Mm-hmm.
post, there's like a comparison post that was going online a little while ago. And I was thinking that, well, just like how with modern buildings, you've got no details and everything is just flat surfaces with no life, no detail, no nothing, and that supposedly gives it value. It's the same with music too, because music once used to be a very detailed oriented thing with lots of different layers, with lots of different emotions and all these intricacies. And like classical music's one of them things that it just never repeats itself. Very rarely classical
Mm-hmm.
music comes back to a note, like a doom metal band would. So the way it works now is that the simplest of music is what wins. I mean, you got think of anything that's on the charts that comes on when you're in like a mall or something. I mean, I usually switch my mind off, but when I think about it, that's like an extremely simplified version of what we had, and somehow that's what's popular. And I think that's kind of a little bit of a tragedy in the way that I think humans have quote unquote progressed in the last however many decades.
Yeah, I don't know really. I think like pop music has always been a thing, and it's always been simple. And I think the main reason, the main difference is that um, songs are created just for the basis of being a song
Mm.
in that area of music. So uh, they're not for the purpose of being one song on a full length album necessarily. I know there are exceptions, but now, and if you compare it to music in that may have been big, that was more detailed, I don't know, like even 80s pop, or if you listen to a 90s pop song, not willingly, but if it's around and you dissect each part of it, there's actually a lot going on. There's always like a really intricate drum line, piano patterns, and things like that. Okay, it's
Precisely.
repetitive, but um, nowadays, like, honestly, I'm very much closed off from hearing things in the outside world music wise, because I walk around with headphones on whenever I'm out somewhere, and I've never really cared enough to analyze the things that I don't like. So
Yeah.
um, but if it is a microcosm of a wider societal symptom, maybe there's something into that, but I think it's more to do with the fact that music has evolved. um, I guess there's not such a thing as big bands necessarily anymore. It's more singers or artists or whatever. And on that basis, the spotlight is on them. It's not on a band doing all the things that they do. And therefore, why bother having complex music if that's not the purpose?
Also a very valid point. The point that the way I'm looking at it, my perspective is that something has happened to us on a bigger scale. I think just as living creatures, where our attention spans are shortened. I mean, we've gone
Mm.
from watching, excuse me, we've gone from watching long 2, 3, sometimes 4 hour films to watching 15-second videos on TikTok. We have gone from building cathedrals to building apartment blocks that are supposedly modern, and it's all just glass and there's like no details to it.
Hmm.
We've even gone from I don't know, muscle cars to cars that are just, they've got no details. There's like no features on it. It's a faceless thing. We've gone from having lots of features to having no features at all. And that's
Hmm.
what I'm saying. It's the same with music. You think of, like you said, you made the example of the pop in the 90s. If you go further back to the 80s style of pop is musically fairly intricate for what it was, or even if you go further back, some of those hits from back in the day. What were your hits? Like ABBA. ABBA's musical fucking genius. I mean, people might not like it, but purely from a technical perspective and composition perspective, there's a lot of stuff going on. Same thing when bands like, I don't know, Boston used to be quite big back then,
Hmm.
and or you made the example of Queen. I mean, Queen's music is heavily multi-layered and it's tons of different attention and detail. And yes, they're memorable songs that you can sing along to and whatnot, and that's why it ends up in the pop category. But nevertheless, they're very intricate. So it's interesting to me how we've just minimized everything, and I just think what a shame that is. I think that that's one thing that, as far as just culture is concerned, whatever this modern thing is supposed to be, I mean, you can really get deep about it and think that, well, nothing lasts longer anymore. Relationships don't last
Hmm.
longer anymore. Especially over Christmas period, the amount of people that have breakups is fucking wild. But then, as like a thing of modern culture, it's like we're so much less dedicated to things. When you think back in the day, someone would commit 20 years just to build a statue. Nowadays,
Hmm.
we can commit 5 minutes to making something that we care about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really taken that line of thinking because behind everything there's a process, and even the end result might look, in comparison to something else, or hear or sound or appear, simplistic or simplified. It doesn't necessarily mean all the thought that goes into it is. And
Mm.
to play the devil's advocate, yes, people may have short attention spans, but the long form conversation of a podcast, whether it's something we're doing now or a 4 hour deep dive into something on something on a very popular podcast platform, gets a lot of traction too. So I think there's so much that's easily available for the majority of the world's population now that you can choose if you want something that demands more attention, more mental focus, or something that's throwaway.
Hmm. This is also true. I think the way you make a very good point. The way I'm looking at it is that no one's willing to be a master at something anymore. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know, man. I'm sure there are plenty of people that defy that around.
I
You
hope
mean just in
so.
terms of
I hope
music,
so.
or in all
Oh, I
semblances
mean,
of
I
things?
mean, in general, like meaning that you pick something and then your entire life is just doing that one thing. So you don't have TV, you don't have social media, you don't have Instagram to distract you, you don't have the news to distract you, you don't spend hours scrolling on your phone. You just perfect your craft as best as you can. That craft can be anything from, I don't know, being a musician. It could be being a sculptor. It could be being someone who's a philosopher, a poet. It could be an engineer. It just feels like we've minimized everything as much as possible to accommodate for more distractions. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I suppose see that because they're not using the mediums that you just described. So uh, yeah, I think it works both ways, really. There's a lot of ingenuity and a lot of advancements that are taking place that the layman won't necessarily know about. So I have to disagree. On the surface, yeah, you're right that the propensity to become focused for things for very narrow time periods and then lose focus is there. That doesn't mean to say that everyone participates in it.
This is true. I guess this is true. And actually, I like your point because then that means that the majority of the population simply just become easier to control because they have less of a path. They are more distracted. So I think it's sort of one of them where both of these are true. And you think about how much there are certain people behind closed doors currently working on things such as AI, which is going to take over everything that we do. If in a sense it already hasn't, maybe it's less visible at this moment in time, but I think it's going to be a slow realization of how that's going to replace everything, right? And that's going to be the result of work of people who dedicate their lives to making it.
Very true. I really don't know much about the topic as a wider discussion point. I know the very small remits of it, how it impacts, let's say, artists, visual artists, and how there might be ramifications for their work, their potential work in future, if it is to be all, or not all, but mostly done via AI, via prompts. We can see that in the metal scene as well, how that's becoming a feature.
Yeah.
Which
is unfortunate, again, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but goes back to what we're saying about budgeting. If you're a new band starting out, not on a label, and you've got a demo, you've got an album that you're self-releasing, and you can't necessarily fund great artwork for however many hundreds of dollars, then yeah, you're going to go down that route. It's a shame. It's putting potentially someone out of work and putting someone out of a creative involvement with someone else's work, and that's really the magic of collaborating with artists and them collaborating with bands. But yeah, again, I don't know, man. It's not something I really know too much about in terms of the wider areas where AI is having an impact on other industries, other professions.
Mm. Well, my biggest concern about it, just like anything else, is for it to go towards an authoritarian path. Really, that's my biggest concern with actually anything, whether it's AI, whether it's any other kind of technology, medicine, religion, all of those things. My concern is always authoritarianism. Speaking of which, you guys recently did a tour in China, of all places. I am very curious to hear how that all went down.
Yeah, we did 2 shows in China. So, well, I don't really know where to start, how it came about. There's a lot that went into it. It was a very stressful few weeks, but I'll try my best to give your listeners a flavor of the hurdles, the bureaucratic hurdles that have to be surpassed for it to take place.
Well, actually, that's the thing that I'm really asking about. So we've got time if you want to go through it.
Yeah, sure. So I got in, or somebody got in touch with me, or the other way around. Guy from a band called Cut, from China. Excellent band. If you're into kind of like Black Witchery, Archgoat style, really well played, very effective. And he floated the idea of bringing us over to play a couple of shows, and the idea swiftly took place, but you have to obtain, I guess, permission, local government permission for a gig to take place. And you have to be, I guess, technically invited by the cultural department or the cultural ministry in, I think every kind of province has their own local culture office. So we had to, well, not us, but the promoter, he had to apply. And in doing so, we had to submit videos of us playing live for ID purposes, as well as I guess, for the ministry to see exactly what's going to be performed. Lyrics we had to show to make sure that nothing was politically sensitive. Thankfully, we're not a political band in any sense, so there's nothing there. I can give you some anecdotes of other bands though later. And
Sure.
so once that was approved, we had to apply for visas, and we had to essentially get work visas, short-term work visas, and those had to be approved as well. It wasn't in my personal case, it wasn't a formality for some reason or another. I had to make numerous trips to the consulate office here, which thankfully is not far away, but numerous trips to try and get it sorted out and for them to tell me exactly what the problem was. And all of this was done in the space of a few weeks, because you can only apply for a visa maximum 30 days prior to your visit.
Wow.
So yeah, my visa was approved, I think 4 days before the first gig. Really cutting it fine. And playing the first show in a city called Hangzhou, there were, I think, maybe 8 or 9 police officers there for the whole show, filming the whole events. probably not for a bootleg, I imagine. And they have these amazing LED screens behind the stage instead of backdrop spaces, so you can put anything on these screens as long as it is permissible by these police officers. So all of the band's backdrops, and I think there were 7 bands playing, they're all checked prior to the show taking place. And our backdrop was just our last album cover, which I know a lot of people don't necessarily like. It's a bit divisive. However, the police didn't want it shown because, in their words, it was too evil. So there you go. The Grave Miasma is too evil for the CCP.
What better compliment, huh?
Yeah. So we had to change the image, and then I've forgotten some more minute details, but you can ask me about what it's like to travel within China, because I actually had an odyssey to get to that city due to some extreme weather that had my flight cancelled. So I had to take a few trains over the course of about 14 hours in total to get to the first show. Yeah.
So, just normally speaking, without any of those delays, how far away is Hong Kong from the city you were trying to get to?
Maybe 2-hour flight.
Okay. Sure. You kind of forget how big Asia is sometimes.
Well, how big China is specifically, but
yes.
Actually to go across the border to China by train takes about 15 minutes from Hong Kong. So, but once I was there, and everything is extremely different, even though it's technically the same country, everything is extremely different once you cross that imaginary border, I suppose.
Do you understand the language?
No, not at all.
Right. How do you make your way around? Because I imagine it's not maybe quite the same level of accommodation as Europe, where you might go to, like, I don't know, Norway, Sweden, Germany, and there's always English signs, but then there's other signs as well. How do you navigate your way around those places?
Well, that's the thing. In Hong Kong, it is like that because I guess the colonial history here, Britain ruled Hong Kong for 70 odd years, and everybody here speaks English either fluently or to some degree of competency.
Yeah, but I'm talking about when you cross the border and go into China to go to the gig.
It's completely different. There's no English anywhere. Even the nearest city across the border, there's no English signposts or options on the ticket machine at the train station, things like that. So it was very stressful to get the right train tickets to get to where I was going, because like I said, there was extreme weather conditions, so a lot of trains were cancelled. And somehow I managed to do it. Really, I can't recall how.
It sounds like an impossible task, but like, how do you even translate things along the way? How do you operate the ticket system if you've never been there? How do you understand, there's weather conditions, so that's why there's delays. So how do you go take us through details, like exactly what that's like? Because that's the point I'm curious about, because I've been in similar situations, but you can
Hmm.
always, as long as there's not too much of a language barrier, you still make your way around. But if it's totally alien, it's like, how have you got any chance of surpassing it? So that's the part I'm interested to hear more about.
Yeah, the easy answer was the promoter was just on the other end of the phone, so I called him
Right.
up and he spoke to people. But um, how to get around there is very different. So just to give you a few anecdotes, um, maybe a bit boring in terms of detail, but it's very.
Oh, sorry, man. I think you got cut off there.
Can you? Yeah,
Yes, I can hear
is
you
that
now.
better?
So yes, yeah. Sorry. So you
Okay.
were just gonna go through some details about how you were going through it.
Mm. Yes. So I arrived. It was on Thursday night, so I had a hotel that was hastily booked for me near a train station. I had to get from the train station to the hotel. Easy, I thought. I'll get to the train station, find a cash machine, hail a taxi. It's 10-minute drive or something like that. No cash machines in a massive train station. They don't operate. Did not see any physical cash the whole time I was there for 3 or 4 days. Um, and to again get a taxi has to be done by app. Everything is just based on apps,
Wait, so have China gone
as well
fully cashless
as
already?
train tickets, right? In terms of some things, probably yeah. At least in the more developed cities, yes. Rural areas, I doubt that that's the case. But in terms of the service industry, in terms of infrastructure in big cities, yeah, everything is totally cashless. And
That
of
is
course, you
very
have to
scary.
connect your yeah. You have to connect your foreign bank accounts to these apps to be able to get from one place to another, and that's not necessarily easy either. So um, another big observation I had is that, and you probably would have heard this idea of the social credit system that they have there, right?
Hmm.
So in order to take trains, it's all you don't have a train ticket, but you have your ID card, and your ticket is I guess sent. You should have your ID card. So if you think about it, the social credit system, if you've committed some kind of crimes, and I've heard this takes place, you can't buy a train ticket to get from one place to another. You're declined from doing so.
That's
Um,
fucking wild.
I've heard that happen. Yeah, it's very strange. It's very strange. So this is how, like you were saying before, how maybe um, technology can lead into authoritarianism. And yes, here's a direct example. And you have some very bizarre um, kind of either visual or audio messages on trains and planes saying like this, your social credit score will be affected if you smoke on the train or use foul language against the staff and things like that. So yeah, it's a very very strange place in terms of I don't know how behavior can be maintained in a collective way.
It's almost like you can see
So yeah,
what would be the benefit of that, but then it's also that's where things could go very wrong because all it takes is you say something, you criticize the government about something that they did wrong, and then all of a sudden your bank account's frozen and you can't do anything.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if that specific example happens, but I'm sure that the the means for it to happen exist.
Well, the worst thing that could happen is for that to be implemented. I think in the
Mm.
Western world, that would be terrible. It'd be
Oh
the
yeah,
worst thing.
yeah. I'm sure there are some governments that kind of thinking, yeah, that's interesting, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell us then, how were the shows themselves? So once you actually got there, what was the reception like?
Mhm.
And did they also, the government, did they review your set list? Because I've heard them do this before. Because I know when Metallica played in China, I can't remember if it was
Mhm.
2014 or whenever. I'm sure you already know about this, but the government made Metallica take Master of Puppets out of the set list,
That's
which
right.
is
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
extremely ironic, by the way. I think that's, you can't make that
Well,
up.
I've got a better example actually. That's an anecdote I heard from somebody else who played in an indie band who played in China, and
Hmm.
their lyrics were, yeah, like I was saying before, everything has to be pre-permitted, right? Including lyrics. So they had one. I don't know the name of the band anyway, but they had a lyric which was "You've got blood on your hands," and they were asked to omit that from their song by the
Yeah.
Chinese government. So
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I'd
yeah,
heard of that one as well. But did you guys have anything like that at all?
yeah. No, and the reason being, quite simply, is because they know that there's nothing uh, singable in death metal. So whilst
Ah,
they would hear the music to essentially see if there's any content that has to be examined for political sensitivity. I think from what I was told, they hear a death metal band like, who's going to hear this anyway? You know, they probably don't want to hear it themselves to go through the content. So, but in terms of you asked about the reception, so yeah, considering that everything was done very hastily, the first show we played had something like 700 people. And
wow.
then the second one, less, maybe 400, 350, 400. Um, and not necessarily to see us or because people knew us, but I think it was the first gig featuring an international metal band for a long time. It's something that's rare. And a lot of people were there, visibly not necessarily into metal, but just curious about an international band with guitars playing. So yeah, yeah. Having said that, there were a lot of people there also who are definitely into the underground, and I mean, China itself doesn't have too many bands, so it's probably not on people's wavelengths as being a country with a big following. But then again, there's a billion people there, so that increases the statistic possibility, I suppose.
Such a fascinating thing to me, man. I can appreciate that as well, where people came to watch you just because they were curious.
Hmm.
That's interesting, and I guess in a sense that's a pretty cool honor to be to have bestowed upon you, right? Where people of average of a country that's not exposed to this music actually get to come and see you live, and then see what that's all about. When there's not many other bands that get to experience that.
Absolutely, man. It was wild just to have that experience, and I hope for the sake of those guys more. I know a band was there just a week or two ago from the US, a death metal band, and for the sake of the people there who are really, really into the music, or people who are just curious, I hope they get some more shows, because like anywhere else, there's a big following there.
Yeah, it's one of them things. It's happening slowly. Obviously, I know China's happened before. I'm pretty sure Cradle of Filth played in China previously, if I remember off memory correctly. But it's cool seeing that happen, and then now you've got Metallica, and I think Cryptopsy playing in Saudi Arabia, which is strange, but again, very cool that that's happening as well.
Hmm.
I'm not personally a big fan of that country whatsoever, but it's interesting that it's all coming together. But that's very funny what you're saying about the death metal lyric thing. That it's like, oh, no one will understand it anyway. You could have used that opportunity to go on stage and in a death metal voice just say "fuck communism," and they wouldn't
Yeah.
have never known about it.
Well, I don't know, man. Do you want to take the risk in that situation? I don't know.
Yeah, obviously. I've taken similar risks back in Iran at times, but that's
Yeah.
that's a different thing maybe. Yeah, but no, it's cool to have the opportunity to just do it, right? And thing is as well, when you're doing things like that, you're sort of responsible for how things are gonna go down for the other bands in the future of the same genre that are gonna go down and play there. So if you went there and then you really made like a mess of it, intentionally, and went full on rebellious, then it's
Mm.
possible that no other bands might actually go back again in the future, because I think that's kind of how a lot of those governments operate. That's how the Iranian government operates. I mean, when we did our show at that at the Niavaran Park in Tehran, this was an open air park, 500-600 people, and we might have been the only bands, if not the only band, that ever actually did a proper open air metal gig in Iran.
Right. Wow.
Back
Okay.
in June 2011, we did this, and we totally lied to the organizers. We said to them, we said that, oh, we were supposed to play. I'm I kind of feel I should feel bad for saying this, but this is how we got the show. Is that
Hmm.
they originally knew of us, and then we'd kind of made contact with them. And it was basically this festival where they had a mixture of everything. They had a stand-up comedian, they had these guys coming playing traditional music, they had someone else coming and talking to the kids, whatever. And at the end of it, we kept putting the pressure on them because we lied to them. What we said to them was this: we said that we were supposed to be playing for Mahak today. And for people who don't know what Mahak is, which I imagine is most of the audience, Mahak is a hospital for children with cancer, and it's like a charity fundraiser.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
we lied to them, saying that we had a performance at Mahak, a charity performance, which we canceled to play for them, and they
Oh.
felt
Okay.
really
Okay.
guilty, so they actually let us play. so
Right.
so we ended up playing, and then it was just fucking crazy. I mean, I still don't know how they didn't arrest us, but I think it's because there was just too many people there, and if they had come in and then arrested us, it would have been too chaotic, or maybe by the time we were finished, it was too late for them to understand. However, what did happen is that after that, they canceled any activities like that in that
Mm.
in that area. So no one was allowed to perform stand-up comedy. No one was allowed to come and read books or say poetry or whatever. We got it all canceled. So my point being that I think if you did the same in China, it's possible it might have had a domino effect in a similar way. And
Yeah.
and, and
I
saying
probably
that,
not, but
s- sorry to interrupt you there as
yeah.
well. Saying that, I have absolutely zero regrets about what we did.
Mm.
just to be clear, because it was about making history, and it was about making a point. But I know that you guys, you're not trying to be excessively shocking or anything. It's just more a piece of art, really. Like a horror piece of art that you just get to observe and kind of get into, rather than, oh, here's something shocking and really like edgy. You know what I mean?
I think anything shocking has been done. Uh, your example is more shocking because the potential consequences of from a personal perspective from your side are probably dire,
Mm.
and in
Yeah.
terms of future events also. But anything that's visual shocking has been done more effectively than I could ever pull off, and probably have the sincerity to pull off. So yeah, you're right in that sense. There's no shock value because, yeah, I don't think there's scope for shock value to necessarily exist in metal anymore. That's been done by people who are household names 20 years ago and still household names. So yeah, you're right. You're right in saying that. And if I was in a situation like we were in China, that's a very alien situation. You don't know what would happen if you pissed off the wrong people.
Mm.
Whether is it worth doing that to be uh, to be put in prison, in Chinese prison for a week? I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not. I think I come from a I think I just come from a place of I've always got an itch under my skin
Yeah,
to
and
wreak
and
havoc.
your own example is something that's where you're from, where you're intimately connected with. Uh, you're not a person that's traveled to that country to play and fuck off a few days later. That was your situation. So
That's true. Hmm.
yeah, then there's a lot more meaning behind it. If and you know that I was thinking about this recently. The most controversial quote unquote rock and roll thing that's been done recently is by some band that were playing Malaysia. They're like a pop rock band. I don't know if you heard about this. It was about 6 months ago.
Okay, what happened? I don't know if I
They're
did hear of it.
a British band, and two of the male members of the band kissed on stage, and they said something on stage about like your government shouldn't tell you who should love each other and things like that. So the most rock and roll thing that's been done lately has essentially been two guys kissing on stage because the concert was then plugged. The police came and shut the whole event down. It was at a big music festival, thousands and thousands of people. So
Wow, wow, that's Jesus. That's quite funny. But yeah,
and
I guess
yeah,
that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. But I guess it was the same with Rammstein because I think their two guitarists did that on stage maybe back in 2019, and then they got permanently banned from Russia to ever play again.
right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously it's Rammstein, so they're only in front of a stadium, and I think Till kind of went back and forth there, and he didn't have any problems, but the band Rammstein are barred from playing Russia ever again, as far as I know. I don't think anyone's playing Russia ever again anytime soon, anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it depends. Like that's I mean, if you talk about shock value, those examples are true shock value because a state has been shocked or offended or probably not offended, but they've been affronted by this to the extent that they would shut down a concert or ban these bands from ever playing, and it's made international news. So the most kind of banal aspect of, I guess, Western liberal life in another place is definitely not the ordinary, out of the ordinary. So rebellion can have its context in many different contexts in many places, man, many different places.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely, and I guess this is where you see the difference to that to I don't know some teenager with an inverted cross around his neck going on stage and ripping up a Bible, right?
Again, some countries that would be, yeah, that would be shocking, of course.
Hmm. But I
But
think if you did that here,
you
people
and
would
me, yeah, if we
just
did that,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's yeah, there's not a linear aspect to this worldwide. So you could do that in a country and probably be lynched
Hmm.
by the security guys, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. I
and
bet
all
if you
power,
did
that's
that.
the thing. All power to a band that wants to do that, because that's again, that is shocking in some places, and there would be the consequences to that.
Fair enough. I guess you know what I like your approach to that. That you're praising it in the sense that at the end of the day, it's not a dick measuring contest. The spirit of rebellion is the spirit of rebellion, and you're saying what you think, and that in itself is an exercise of free speech, which is probably the most important thing of all. So perhaps if that's how you feel at that time, then go for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think going back to the idea of like shock value, if things are done purely out of shock value, it has its place, it has its merit, and it will have consequences. If it's done from pure, like, I don't know, your example was something kind of ideological, I guess. You
Mm.
wanted to do your own way of rebelling against the state's ideology, against their control, and you found a way to do that, then that's awesome. Like it has definitely more meaning than like you say, an inverted cross or something like that,
Mhm.
because that's just a trope. It's not rebellion.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I think the way I look at it is that I wasn't trying to be rebellious for the sake of it. I just
Hmm.
really wanted to play metal and I really wanted to play this music. Well, obviously, I still do. but it was the state that was getting in my way, so I went and did it anyway. That's kind of
Mm.
that was kind of how it was. And it's not rebellion for the sake of it, but sort of like, you leave me to do my business, I leave you to do your business, but then if you get into my business, you're gonna get burnt, and then I might get burnt too. It's kind of like it's an interesting dilemma in general. But it's a very interesting philosophy. It's something that I'm always paying attention to, because a lot of times as well, I feel like, it's not being shocking for the sake of it, but I feel like by exercising that need of expression within yourself, first and foremost, you just get to know yourself better, right?
100%, man. Like, if you're gonna walk on the fire, then see how you come out of it. Because then afterwards,
Exactly.
it's not necessarily in your control what happens, and that's you know that's the risk, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is how you are also, how you get the key to want to change your mind as well. Because you might think, oh, I hate religion, I hate religion, I hate religion, I hate religion. And then you go on stage and then you rip up a Bible or a Quran or whatever. And this is a very hypothetical example, all
Hmm.
right? But I'm saying that once you get that aggression out of your system, and you actually, especially if you get praised for it, and then you come off stage and then you're kind of like, well, maybe I don't actually hate it as much. I needed to get that anger out of my system, but now that the emotions are off of my shoulders, I can kind of think about it a bit more logically and with a bit more perspective. Does that make sense? So sometimes it's like you have to scream and shout and get that emotion off your chest, and
Mm.
then you can sort of think of it a little bit more rationally and kind of look at the bigger picture, if you will.
Yeah. So, from what I'm hearing, it's like there's a merit to the impetuosity of the action, and that in itself has its
Mm.
own energy. And once that's done, then you can kind of logically look at the feeling of it, or something like that.
Precisely. Yes,
Yeah.
precisely. Because it's like anything. You might sometimes have a thought in your head that is right, but then as soon as that thought reaches the tip of your tongue and you say it out loud, you immediately realize, oh no, hang on a minute, that sounded really stupid, right?
Yeah, and then afterwards, it's not under your control what happens, I suppose, and that's yeah, that's the huge risk. But like I said about sort of shock value, really, there's nothing in death metal that's of shock value now, in
Mm.
my at least. But then again, I've been involved in this for a long time. If you play it to somebody or show it to somebody that isn't involved at all and it's something new, then yes, it probably would be.
For sure, for sure. So, what's the just to kind of like reel this back in then? So, what's the plans for Grave Miasma at this point? What have you guys got down the pipeline? I know you said that hopefully there will be a new album on the way
Hmm.
sometime soon as well, either soon or later, whenever it comes
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're still writing stuff. We've got a couple of shows coming up in the US this May, and then in Europe in the summer. And after that, again, just more writing and shows, of course, but not as extensively and as often as they have been. So
Mm.
yeah, everything's still going to happen, just not in the same volume.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that, man. I don't know if you actually recall this, but first time we ever played together, I think this might have been Rose's last show with you, or one of his last gigs with you guys.
Hmm.
But this was at, I think, was it Cosmic Terror Fest in Leeds back in
Oh yeah,
December,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was his
December
last show. That's
2019?
right. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. And I remember, I obviously knew of you guys, and we had mutual contacts, but I didn't know you quite as well back then. But
Hmm.
do remember there being some kind of like a somber mood backstage, as well as obviously like all the incense and oud that you had burning backstage in your room, which was cool.
Ah, I think it was somber because it was fucking freezing,
Oh
and
yeah.
we'd been playing a few shows. We were playing with Spectral Voice. We've been touring. We did a kind of mini tour with them for 4 or 5 dates, and that was the final one. I think everyone was just ill after spending time in the van with one another. Great guys, amazing bands, amazing, incredible live band, really. And I think we were probably just pissed off that was the last night of of the experience, you know. And of course, it was Ro's last gig, so after that, everything. Well, it wasn't up in the air. We were always going to continue, but we knew that it was the end of an era, I suppose. And those few shows we did had that weight hanging over them a little bit. Speaking to, I think we played in Berlin, somewhere in Belgium, London, and then Leeds, maybe one other show as well. And just having conversations with people, contacts and acquaintances from all the cities, really the same conversation. So what are you going to do when Ro's gone? I can't believe he's going, all this kind of stuff. And it was weighing heavily on us in that sense. So yeah, there was that context of things, as well as it fucking freezing, if I remember correctly as well.
It was very cold. This was on Sunday, 8th of December 2019, if I recall correctly, at the Temple of Boom in Leeds. I'm very good with dates, that's why I remember. And,
okay, yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it was a great performance, but yeah, I remember it was very cold, and especially if you went upstairs to the where the backstage area was. I mean, the Boom's a funny venue anyway. You know, I do like the vibe of it, but it gets pretty cold, and I think I remember I left some moldy boots there because I had my biker boots buried for a few months before that, so they looked white because they were covered in mold, and that's what I was playing in, and it was actually making me cough on stage, and I thought, not sure if this is a great idea, but you know, it served its purpose. But it was a very cool show, and I mean, you guys totally kicked ass that night as well. I remember speaking to Ro that night. I remember saying to him upstairs, I was like, that was a really good show, man, and he almost seemed to be surprised, but then was like, oh yeah, that's cool, thanks, man. You know, kind of, it was like one of them things, you know, that there must have been so much going on at that point, because I know that he went through a bit of a thing around that time, you know, where not only he left you guys, but he also left Destroyer, and then
that's right. So I mean, I can't speak for him, he's not here, but to chime in, but he'd done a really long tour with Destroyer. It was either in the US or Latin America. Really brutal, you know, travel distances, hardly any sleep. Probably a killer tour, but very, very crushing in a physical sense. And then he came back, and a few days later, he sent me a message about wanting to meet up to talk about something. I knew that there was something wrong band-wise because I'd known him for a long time, and the way the message was worded, it sounded a bit ominous. So he told me then, and this was in 2018. So he essentially said at the end of the following year, he was going to stop playing with all bands. So he'd basically given a year's notice to Destroyer and us at the same time, saying that, you know, whilst that's only like fair for both bands to not, because everyone had gigs planned. So thereafter, we kind of accepted it. I tried my best to convince him otherwise. He actually wasn't really involved in any writing from that point either. So Danny, Tom, and I did all the writing thereafter for the Abyss records, whilst he was involved in 3 tracks for writing.
Was Ancestral Waters was one of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's one of those.
I recall this because that's what I named the episode that I did with him about a year and a half ago, whenever it was that we did that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote the lyrics for that. I changed some of them to fit rhythmically with the riffs. And we did another track which wasn't on the record actually, which we're going to release at some point.
Cool.
Where we all worked on that together. So yeah, where was I? Sorry, man, I've lost my train of thought. So speaking about when Ro left the band in that show.
Yeah.
And then the most important fact that I was going to mention was that then COVID happens, and there's no gigs, there's no tours, there's no kind of activity for a long time. And I've always wondered if had Ro known that, and it would have been 2 years of not doing anything, had he been like, okay, well, just take 2 years of not playing shows and then I'll come back to it, because obviously he's playing with a Dorior, so you never know. But and this is for any other members of bands out there who intrinsic members might leave the band, that if that happens, you just have to carry on and create a new history, the next monument, I suppose, because that didn't diminish what we did thereafter. I think Tom, who was playing bass, he switched to guitar. He's really made that his own. He's given everything his own flavor. He's an incredible guitar player himself. So
yeah, Tom's a very good player. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's not a death knell when this happens, but as a dynamic of the band, it was a real blow, I have to say, for a while. And now we've just kind of like, we've got a lineup, a very strong lineup now. So it's a different dynamic, but it's a very strong dynamic.
That's right, yeah, and you got Amadeus on bass as well.
Yeah.
He's cool. We shared the stage together because when I was doing the last show I did with Deitus in Germany, Amadeus was also on bass. I don't know if he's still playing for them or not, but it was cool to play with him. He was driving the flight attendants up the wall on the way back, so that was quite fun.
Okay, just didn't have to ask him about that. He's great to have around. He's a really good travel companion. Maybe not for the attendants, but for us, he's great. And
he's solid
at what he does. So he's great to have in the band. And
absolutely,
so even though, because like going back to what I was saying a while ago about how the band started, it started with the three of us, and we were all doing things equally in terms of what we put into the writing, what we put into the visual aspects, and bouncing ideas around, things like that. So once Ro left, that's like a very, very important part of the band, but it didn't necessarily mean that things were finished. We really knew that was always going to be the case, that we could continue and still write and still record.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'm very excited to know that the band is still going. Obviously, we've had the privilege to share the stage since then, and hopefully there will be some more. Eventually, when you guys end up coming back around this neck of the woods, as they call it. But listen, Yoni, brother, I very much appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And wishing you all the best with the band, with Grave Miasma, and also with life in Hong Kong. Hopefully the state of the world doesn't get too heated too quickly, and we still get to enjoy things. But yeah, man, all the best to you. Is there anything you want to let the audience know? Anything for them to keep an eye out for at the moment that you guys might be doing?
Yeah, I guess so. We're going to confirm some shows in the UK, and
cool.
One particular show in Europe, which is going to be a different show. It's going to be a very comprehensive show in terms of what we're going to play. So that's all I'm going to say for now. It's going to be announced soon.
Amazing. Well, this should be coming out, I would say, roughly about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So do you think you could reveal it? Do you think it'll have been out by then?
I don't know if it's going to be out there by then, but we are going to be playing a lot of old tracks in sequence. So yeah, make of that what you will.
Excellent to hear that, man. Well, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure all of your Wild Fanatic fans will be following anyway, nevertheless. But Yoni, once again, thank you so much, brother, for joining me, man. It's been a real pleasure to speak.
Thanks, man. Absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. Keep doing what you're doing. And great to see the podcast and the band really blow up, I guess, in the last couple of months.
I very much appreciate it, man. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And to everyone listening to the podcast as well, hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Bye-bye.